The letter trembled in Evelyn May Whitmore's gloved hands as she read it for the dozenth time. Standing in the shadow of Boston's North Station, the November wind cut through her threadbare coat, but she barely noticed. Her eyes traced the careful penmanship once more. Miss Whitmore, I accept your proposal. A ticket awaits at the station. S. Ward, Wyoming Territory. 6 months ago, she would have laughed at the notion of becoming a mail-order bride. 6 months ago, she had been the daughter of a respectable merchant, with suitors calling every Sunday after church. But that was before Charles Pemberton had cornered her in the garden during her sister's engagement party, before his wife had discovered them in what appeared to be a compromising position, before the whispers began. Fallen woman, temptress, no longer pure. It mattered little that Charles had forced himself upon her, that she had fought him off before anything truly happened. In Boston society, appearance was everything, and she had been seen alone with a married man, her dress torn, her hair disheveled. Her protests of innocence fell on deaf ears. Even her own father had turned his back, declaring her dead to the family. The train whistle pierced the cold air. Evelyn clutched her single carpet bag, all she owned now, and joined the queue of passengers. The ticket agent barely glanced at her as he punched her passage. Boston to Cheyenne, then by stage to Cedar Ridge, Wyoming Territory, 3,000 miles from everything she'd ever known. The journey west was a descent into another world. Through the window of the rocking train car, she watched civilization gradually strip away. The neat farms of Pennsylvania gave way to the endless prairies of Nebraska. The comfortable passenger cars were exchanged for bone-jarring stagecoaches that lurched over rutted trails. She shared close quarters with miners reeking of whiskey, fallen women heading to frontier brothels, and families with hollow-eyed children seeking new beginnings. By the time the stage deposited her at Cedar Ridge, if 4 ramshackle buildings could be called a town, Evelyn's hands were blistered from gripping the leather straps, and her black traveling dress was gray with alkali dust. The November sky hung low and threatening, promising the first snows. You the Boston woman? The stage driver spat tobacco juice into the dirt. Ward's place is 8 miles north. He said he'd be waiting. And there he was, a lone figure beside a weathered wagon, as still as the mountains behind him. Silas Ward was nothing like she'd imagined. His letter had been written in an educated hand, but the man before her looked carved from the landscape itself. Tall and lean, with shoulders broadened by years of labor. He wore canvas pants and a wool coat that had seen better decades. His face was all angles and shadows beneath a worn hat, and when he removed it in greeting, she saw dark hair threaded with premature silver. He couldn't have been more than 35, but his eyes, gray as winter sky, held the weight of a much older man. Miss Whitmore. His voice was low, roughened by wind and little use. He didn't smile. The preacher's waiting in town. Best get it done before the snow. No pleasantries, no comfort, just practicality. Evelyn lifted her chin, though her heart sank. Of course, Mr. Ward. The ceremony was as stark as everything else in this hard land. The preacher, a circuit rider who smelled of horse and wood smoke, performed the service in the back room of the general store. The proprietor and his wife served as witnesses, their face carefully neutral. No flowers, no music, no well wishes. When the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Silas merely nodded and placed a simple iron ring on her finger, cold and heavy as a shackle. The ride to his ranch took 2 hours through gathering dusk. They sat side by side on the wagon bench, not touching, as Silas navigated the rough track by memory. The mountains loomed closer with each mile, and the temperature plummeted. Evelyn pulled her inadequate shawl tighter, trying not to shiver. "There's buffalo robes in the back," Silas said without looking at her. His first words since the ceremony? She fumbled behind the seat and wrapped herself in the heavy fur, breathing in its wild scent. "Thank you." Silence returned, broken only by the creak of wheels and the steady clap of hooves. Finally, as full dark approached, she saw it. A low cabin of chinked logs nestled in a valley between 2 ridges. A thin spiral of smoke rose from the stone chimney. A barn and corral materialized from the gloom. And beyond that, nothing but wilderness. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly neat. One large room served as kitchen and living space. With a curtained alcove she assumed was the bedroom. Everything was handmade but well-crafted. A pine table and chairs. Shelves lined with preserves and supplies. Cast iron pots hanging from hooks. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting dancing shadows. It was clean, organized, and utterly devoid of any feminine touch. "Your room's through there." Silas nodded toward a door she hadn't noticed. "Was going to be—" He stopped, jaw tightening. "It's yours now. There's water in the pitcher for washing. Privy's out back." Evelyn blinked. "My room." He finally met her eyes, and something flickered in those gray depths. Pain, perhaps, or resignation. "I won't touch you unless you want it. That's not why I need a wife." The words stung more than she expected. She'd prepared herself for a loveless marriage, for duty and endurance. But this cold distance, this careful segregation, it made her feel like hired help rather than a wife. Then why, Mr. Ward? Why bring a woman 3,000 miles, if not for that? He turned away, hanging his hat on a peg. "Ranch this size needs 2 people to run it. Winter's coming. I need someone who can cook, mend, help with the stock when needed. In return, you get a roof, food, and my name. It's a fair bargain." A bargain, not a marriage. Evelyn felt her throat tighten. "I see. I'll show you the kitchen stores in the morning. There's bread and cold meat if you're hungry." He moved toward the curtained alcove, then paused. "We'll manage well enough, Mrs. Ward, long as we both know where we stand." Alone in her small room, barely large enough for a narrow bed and washstand, Evelyn finally allowed the tears to fall. She'd traded the cruel whispers of Boston for the cruel silence of Wyoming. She'd escaped one form of shame only to find another, unwanted there, unneeded here beyond her practical uses. Outside, the wind howled through the valley, rattling the windows. The first snowflakes began to fall, white ghosts against the black night. She was 3,000 miles from home, married to a stranger who couldn't bear to look at her, in a place so isolated that the nearest neighbor was probably days away. She pressed her face into the thin pillow to muffle her sobs. What had she done? What desperate foolishness had driven her to answer that advertisement, to believe that somewhere in this vast, hard country, she might find a place to belong? Through the thin walls, she heard movement, footsteps pacing, then stopping. A chair creaking. Did he hear her crying? Did he care? The footsteps approached her door, hesitated. For a moment, she held her breath, waiting. Then they retreated, and she heard the front door open and close. From her window, she could see his silhouette by the corral, standing motionless in the falling snow. A man as alone as she was, frozen in place by something she didn't yet understand. The sight of him, broad shoulders bent against the wind, utterly solitary, made her tears flow harder. She had escaped Boston's shame, only to enter a different kind of purgatory. But as she watched her new husband stand vigil in the snow, she sensed that his coldness might not be cruelty, but something else entirely, something that had frozen his heart long before she arrived. The wind sang its lonely song through the valley, and somewhere in the darkness, wolves howled. Evelyn May Ward curled into herself and wondered if spring would ever come to this desolate place, or to the man she'd bound herself to with promises neither of them believed. The first weeks passed in a rhythm of careful avoidance. Silas rose before dawn, disappearing into the pre-light darkness to tend the stock. By the time Evelyn emerged from her room, he'd already eaten, evidenced by the single plate and cup in the wash basin. She'd find coffee warming on the stove, biscuits wrapped in cloth, but never him. She learned his routines by his absences, morning chores until noon, mending fences or hauling hay until dusk, evenings in the barn, working leather or repairing tack by lantern light. He came in only for the supper she'd prepared, eating in silence while she darned socks or worked on hemming the heavy curtains she'd found in a trunk. "Thank you," he'd say, pushing back from the table. Then he'd retreat to his side of the cabin, leaving her to clean up alone. The loneliness was suffocating. In Boston, even as a pariah, she'd had the bustle of city life, the comfort of familiar streets. Here, the silence pressed in from all sides, broken only by wind and the occasional bawl of cattle. She found herself talking to the chickens as she gathered eggs, carrying on one-sided conversations with the milk cow just to hear a human voice, even if it was only her own. One morning, 3 weeks into their marriage, she discovered the locked door. She'd been exploring the cabin more thoroughly, learning where Silas kept everything. When she found it, a door at the back of the house she'd assumed led to a storage room, but the padlock was heavy, newer than anything else in the cabin. When she'd asked about it at supper, his face had shuddered completely. "Nothing you need concern yourself with," he'd said, and left the table though his plate was still half full. The mystery gnawed at her. What kind of man locked rooms in his own house? What secrets warranted such protection? The answer came during the first real blizzard of winter. She'd been foolish, venturing out to the chicken coop when the snow was already falling thick. The storm had come up suddenly, as they did in Wyoming, turning afternoon to twilight in minutes. She'd gathered the eggs, secured the coop, and started back to the house, only to lose her bearings in the whiteout conditions. The wind knocked her sideways. Snow filled her nose and mouth, blinding her. She stumbled, fell, tried to rise. Which way was the house? The barn? Everything was white fury and howling chaos. Her hands were already numb, her thin shawl useless against the assault. "Silas!" The wind tore his name from her lips. She tried again, screaming now. "Silas!" A shape materialized from the storm. Tall, dark, moving with purpose. Strong arms caught her as her knees buckled. "Damn foolish woman," she heard him growl. But his arms were gentle as he lifted her against his chest. She buried her face in his coat, breathing in leather and wool and something indefinably him. He carried her as if she weighed nothing, navigating blind through the storm. Inside, he didn't put her down immediately. She felt him kick the door shut, heard him curse under his breath. Her teeth were chattering so hard she couldn't speak. He carried her to the fireplace, set her in his own chair, the one she never dared occupy. "Can you feel your fingers?" His hands engulfed hers, rough and warm. She tried to answer, but only managed to shake her head. He cursed again, then did something that shocked her. He unbuttoned his shirt and pressed her frozen hands against his chest, inside the flannel, against bare skin. The heat of him made her gasp. "I know it hurts," he said quietly. "Means they're not too far gone. Keep them there." She was too cold to be embarrassed, too grateful for his warmth to protest the impropriety. He pulled a buffalo robe from somewhere, wrapped it around them both, cocooning her against him. For the first time since their wedding, they were truly touching, her hands on his chest, his arms around her, her head tucked under his chin. "Could have died out there," he murmured, and she felt him tremble, not from cold, she realized, but from something else. Fear? 3 minutes, maybe 5 in a storm like this. Then you're just another frozen corpse come spring thaw. "I'm sorry," she whispered against his shirt. "The chickens, damn the chickens." His arms tightened fractionally. "They know to roost when a storm comes. You should too." They stayed that way as her body slowly thawed, as feeling returned to her extremities in waves of pins and needles. She became aware of other things, the steady beat of his heart under her palms, the way his breath stirred her hair, the careful way he held her, as if she might break or bolt. When she finally stopped shivering, he pulled back, gently extracting her hands. His face was flushed, his gray eyes darker than usual. "Better?" "Yes, thank you." He stood abruptly, turning away. "I'll heat some soup." But his hands shook as he ladled broth into a pot, and she noticed. That night, the storm raged on. The little cabin groaned under the assault, and drafts found every chink in the logs. Evelyn lay in her narrow bed, still feeling the phantom warmth of Silas's chest against her palms. Through the thin wall, She heard him pacing, restless as a caged wolf. Near midnight, unable to sleep, she ventured into the main room. He was sitting before the fire, head in his hands. On the table beside him lay an open Bible and, her heart clenched, a small wooden toy horse, worn smooth by small fingers. He looked up at her entrance, and for a moment his guard was down. She saw it all in his eyes, grief so profound it had carved hollows in his soul. "Couldn't sleep," she said unnecessarily. He nodded, gesturing to the other chair. They sat in companionable silence, watching the flames. Finally, he spoke, voice barely above a whisper. Her name was Mary, my wife. He picked up the toy horse, turned it in his hands. "This was Thomas's, my boy. He was 4. Evelyn waited, hardly breathing. "Scarlet fever took them both last spring. Same week, I buried them out back, under the big pine." His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white where he gripped the toy. "Doctor said it happens sometimes. Whole families, gone in days. But I didn't take sick. Don't know why. Wished I had. Silas, that locked room was theirs. Can't bring myself to clear it out. Can't bring myself to go in there at all." He set the horse down carefully, like it might shatter. "I put that advertisement up in a moment of weakness. Ranch is too much for one man, and the loneliness." He shook his head. "But it wasn't fair to you, bringing you here when I've got nothing left to give, when I'm just empty." Evelyn found her voice. "You saved my life today. Basic decency, any man would—" "You held me." The words tumbled out before she could stop them. "You could have just brought me inside, built up the fire, but you held me." "That's not empty. Silas, that's not nothing." He looked at her then, really looked at her for the first time since their wedding. She saw surprise there, and something else, a flicker of warmth in all that gray grief. "Why did you really answer my advertisement?" he asked suddenly. "A woman like you, educated, refined, what are you running from?" So she told him. In the firelight, with the storm sealing them away for the world, she spoke of Charles Pemberton, of violence dressed up as seduction, of a society that blamed the victim. She told him about the whispers, the turned backs, her father's cold declaration that she was no daughter of his. When she finished, Silas's jaw was tight with anger. "He forced himself on you?" "He tried. I fought him off, but—" "But they blamed you anyway." He stood abruptly, paced to the window. "God damn them all." The vehemence in his voice surprised her. He turned back, and his eyes held a fierce protectiveness that made her heart skip. "You did nothing wrong," he said firmly. "Nothing. You hear me?" Tears she didn't expect welled up. "My own father didn't believe that." "Then your father's a fool." He crossed back to her, knelt beside her chair, the first time he'd ever lowered himself in her presence. "Evelyn, look at me." She did, tears streaming now. "You survived. You got away. You had the courage to come 3,000 miles to start over. That's not shame. That's strength." She broke then, sobbing as she hadn't since that first night, and Silas, grieving, closed off Silas, gathered her into his arms and let her cry against his shoulder. His hand stroked her hair awkwardly, as if he'd forgotten how to give comfort but was trying to remember. When her tears finally ceased, she pulled back to find his own eyes wet. "I'm a mess," she said, embarrassed. "We're both messes." A ghost of a smile touched his lips, the first she'd seen. "Maybe that's why fate brought you here. 2 broken people, trying to figure out how to be whole again." They talked through the night as the storm raged. About Mary, who loved wildflowers and sang while she worked. About Thomas, who wanted to be just like his papa. About Boston society and Wyoming winters and the strange turns life takes. When dawn came, pale and crystal clear after the storm, they were still in their chairs by the dead fire, a blanket shared between them. Silas made breakfast, the first time he'd stayed to eat with her in the morning. As she poured coffee, their fingers brushed and neither pulled away. It wasn't love yet. Maybe it wasn't even friendship. But it was something. A bridge built of shared pain and midnight confessions. For the first time since arriving in Wyoming, Evelyn didn't feel entirely alone, and in Silas's eyes, she caught glimpses of the man he'd been before grief froze him solid. Spring was still months away, but perhaps the thaw had already begun. Winter settled over the valley like a heavy quilt, forcing them into close quarters. The days shortened until darkness claimed most of their waking hours, and the work shifted from outdoor labor to indoor tasks. They fell into new rhythms, Silas teaching Evelyn to mend harnesses while she showed him a better way to darn socks. Their conversations were still sparse, but the silences had lost their sharp edges. One evening, while a particularly fierce wind rattled the windows, Evelyn found Silas struggling with a tear in his coat. "Here," she said, reaching for it. "You're making it worse." He surrendered the garment without protest. Progress, she thought, as she worked her needle through the heavy wool. He watched her hands with an intensity that made her self-conscious. Mary couldn't sew worth a damn, he said suddenly. Used to tease her about it, said she could birth a calf and break a horse, but couldn't make a straight seam to save her life. Evelyn smiled. He'd been mentioning Mary more often, small memories that seemed to ease rather than pain him. What did she do about clothing? Traded preserves to Mrs. Henderson over the ridge, 20 miles each way. But Mary's blackberry jam was worth gold to the neighbors. He leaned back, eyes distant. She tried to teach me to make it before, never could get it right. I know how to make jam, Evelyn offered carefully. Come summer, if there are berries. There are whole hillside of them behind the north pasture. He met her eyes. Would you? I mean, it wouldn't be the same, but I'd be honored. Something passed between them in that moment, fragile as spun glass. He cleared his throat, looking away. Thank you. They began spending evenings by the fire together, reading from his small library, the Bible, an almanac, a worn copy of Shakespeare's sonnets that surprised her. Mary loved the sonnets, he explained, running his fingers over the leather binding. I'd read them to her Sunday evenings. Don't suppose you'd... He trailed off, embarrassed. I'd like that, Evelyn said softly. So he read, his rough voice gentling over the familiar words. Let me not to the marriage of true minds admit impediments. She watched him in the firelight, seeing the man he'd been emerging from the shadows, educated, thoughtful, capable of tenderness. The breakthrough came during a brief January thaw. The temperature rose enough to make outside work possible, and Evelyn insisted on helping repair the fence line. They worked side by side in companionable rhythm, post-hole digger and wire stretcher, breath puffing white in the still cold air. You're getting soft, she teased when she caught him watching her instead of working. At this rate, the cattle will be in Montana before we finish. He smiled, really smiled, and the transformation was remarkable. Years fell away, revealing laugh lines that grief had obscured. Soft, am I? This from a Boston lady who couldn't tell a heifer from a bull when she arrived? I learn fast. She hefted a post with exaggerated ease. Maybe I don't need you at all. Maybe I'll run this ranch myself. Maybe you could, he said, but his tone had shifted, grown serious. You're stronger than you know. Evelyn. Her name on his lips still felt new, precious. She turned back to the fence, flustered, but as she reached for the wire, her foot slipped on hidden ice. She windmilled, falling backward. Silas caught her, arms strong around her waist, pulling her against him. For a moment they stood frozen, her back to his chest, his breath warm against her ear. She felt his heart hammering, or was that hers? Careful, he murmured, but he didn't let go. She turned in his arms, looking up at him. His gray eyes had darkened, pupils wide. His gaze dropped to her mouth, and she saw the moment he made his decision. Slowly, giving her time to pull away, he lowered his head. The kiss was hesitant at first, a question more than a statement. She answered by rising on her toes, hands finding his shoulders. He made a sound, relief, hunger, and deepened the kiss, one hand tangling in her hair while the other pressed against the small of her back. It was nothing like Charles Pemberton's brutal assault. This was mutual, desperate, two lonely souls reaching for warmth. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Silas stepped back, running a hand through his hair. I shouldn't have. Don't, Evelyn interrupted. Don't apologize, unless you didn't want. God, Evelyn. He laughed, but it sounded pained. Want? I've wanted since you walked into my home smelling of lavender and looking like everything I thought I'd never have again. But wanting and deserving are different things. Who says you don't deserve? I couldn't save them. The words ripped from him. My wife, my boy. They were burning with fever, calling for me, and I couldn't do anything but watch them die. What kind of man? She stopped him with her fingers against his lips. The kind who stayed, the kind who held their hands and loved them to the end. That's not failure, Silas, that's devotion. His eyes closed, and she saw him struggle with years of self-recrimination. When he opened them again, something had shifted. You're not her, he said quietly. I need you to know that. I'm not trying to replace. I know. And she did. I'm not looking for who you were before. I'm learning who you are now. He cupped her face in his work-roughened hands, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. Who I am now is a mess of a man who can't promise you anything but trying. Then try, she whispered. He kissed her again, deeper this time. Months of loneliness and longing poured into the connection. When her knees weakened, he swept her up into his arms, carrying her toward the house with determined strides. Silas, if you're going to change your mind, do it now, he said roughly. Because once we're inside, I'm not changing my mind. But at the door, he hesitated. Your room or mine? She understood the question beneath the question. Her room was neutral territory, free of memories. His room, their room, was where he'd slept beside Mary, loved her, perhaps held her as she died. Yours, she said firmly. If we're doing this, we're doing it honestly. No hiding from ghosts. His arms tightened around her. He carried her through the house to the curtained alcove she'd never entered. The room was simple. A large bed with a colorful quilt, a dresser, hooks for clothes. But on the nightstand sat a daguerreotype in a silver frame, a pretty woman with kind eyes holding a laughing toddler. Silas set Evelyn down gently, followed her gaze. Should I? No, they're part of you. Hiding them won't change that. He turned to her then with something like wonder. How did a fancy Boston lady get so wise? Pain is a good teacher, she said simply. What followed was tender and fumbling and perfect in its imperfection. Two damaged people relearning trust through touch. Silas's hands shook as he unpinned her hair, and she felt her own trembling as she unbuttoned his shirt. They came together like the last two pieces of a broken whole, not quite fitting, edges still sharp, but holding nonetheless. Afterward, they lay entwined, her head on his chest, his fingers combing through her unbound hair. The afternoon light slanted through the window, painting gold stripes across the quilt. I haven't. Not since. He couldn't finish, but she understood. I know. Did I hurt you? She pressed a kiss to his chest. No, Silas. You could never. They dozed, woke to explore each other again with growing confidence. When evening came, they rose and dressed, moving around each other with new awareness. At supper, their knees touched under the table. When she served his coffee, he caught her hand, pressed it to his lips. That night, when bedtime came, he stood awkwardly by the fire. I don't presume, just because your room is still. Silas Ward, she said firmly. If you think I'm sleeping alone after today, you're not as smart as I credited. Relief and joy flickered across his face. Yes, ma'am. They settled into the big bed together, her back curved against his chest, his arm heavy around her waist. Outside, wolves howled in the distance, but inside was warmth and safety and the beginning of something neither had dared hope for. Evelyn? His voice was drowsy in the darkness. Thank you. For what? For being brave enough for both of us. She laced her fingers through his. We're brave together. Just before sleep took her, she felt him press a kiss to her hair. Together. He agreed. And in that word was a promise of all the seasons to come. The thaw had truly begun. In the depths of winter, in the hearts of two people who'd thought themselves frozen forever. Spring was still months away, but hope, that most persistent of growing things, had already taken root. Spring arrived like a hesitant visitor, testing the valley with warm afternoons before retreating into frosty nights. The snow melted in patches, revealing the brown earth beneath, and the ice on the creek broke with sounds like gunshots. Evelyn had never worked so hard in her life, and had never felt so alive. She rose with Silas before dawn now, moving together through morning chores with practiced efficiency. She could milk the cow without spilling, gather eggs without disturbing the temperamental rooster, and even help with calving when needed. Her hands, once soft from Boston society life, were now calloused and strong. "Look at you," Silas said one morning, watching her haul water from the well. "Regular ranch woman now." She flexed her arm playfully. "Stronger than some cowboys I could name." He laughed, a sound that came easier these days, and caught her around the waist, spinning her despite the heavy buckets. "That so? Care to wrestle me for who makes breakfast?" Silas Ward. But she was laughing too, clinging to his shoulders as he set her down. These moments of lightness felt like miracles, each one a small victory over the grief that had held him captive. The ranch hands started arriving in April. Two young men named Jake and Samuel who'd worked for Silas before. They eyed Evelyn with curiosity and careful respect, tipping their hats and calling her Mrs. Ward, in tones that suggested they'd heard about the mail-order bride, but found her different than expected. "You've got them terrified," Silas teased after Jake nearly tripped over his own feet trying to get out of her way. "Good," she said, but she softened it by sending out a batch of fresh donuts with their afternoon coffee. By week's end, she'd won them over completely. The real test came with the spring gather, a week of hard riding to collect the cattle that had scattered through the winter. Silas initially resisted her involvement. "It's dangerous work. Cows get contrary when they've got calves. And the terrain is nothing worse than what I've already crossed getting here." She interrupted. "I can ride. You taught me yourself. Riding around the pasture isn't the same as working cattle." She planted her hands on her hips. "Silas Ward, do you trust me or not?" He sighed, recognizing defeat. "Woman, you'll be the death of me." "Not if you're careful," she countered, already heading for the barn to saddle her mare. The gather was exhausting, exhilarating work. Evelyn learned to read the movement of cattle, to anticipate when a cow would break from the herd. She ate dust, got knocked into a stream by an ornery steer, and discovered muscles she didn't know existed. But she also experienced the profound satisfaction of being truly useful, truly part of something. On the fourth night, camped under stars so bright they hurt to look at. She sat by the fire listening to Jake's harmonica while Samuel told tall tales. Silas sat close beside her, their thighs touching, his arm draped casual and possessive across her shoulders. "Never seen the boss so easy," Jake murmured to Samuel when they thought she couldn't hear, "like a different man." She felt Silas tense slightly, but she leaned into him, pressing a kiss to his jaw. "Just a man remembering who he is," she said quietly, for his ears alone. The change in their relationship was evident to everyone. Where once they'd moved around each other like polite strangers, now they flowed together like water finding its course. He'd catch her hand as she passed. She'd smooth his hair when it fell across his forehead. At night in their bed, truly their bed now, they came together with increasing passion and tenderness. One evening, as she prepared supper, he came up behind her, wrapping his arms around her waist and burying his face in her neck. "You smell like sunshine," he murmured. "I smell like horses and sweat," she corrected, but she leaned back into his embrace. "Same thing, out here." He turned her in his arms, studied her face. "You're happy?" The question caught her off guard. "Yes," she said, realizing it was true. "Happier than I ever expected to be? Are you?" His answer was in his kiss, deep and claiming. When he pulled back, his eyes were serious. "You know you're not what I expected. A mail-order bride rarely is. I imagine—" "No, I mean—" He struggled for words. "I wrote that advertisement thinking I needed someone to cook and clean, keep the ranch running. I didn't expect—" He gestured helplessly between them. "Love?" she supplied softly. He went very still. They hadn't used that word yet, dancing around it like it might burn. "Is that what this is?" "I don't know what else to call it," she admitted. "When you leave in the morning, I count the hours until you return. When you smile, my whole day brightens. When you hurt, I hurt. If that's not love." He silenced her with another kiss, this one desperate and raw. "Say it again," he demanded against her lips. "I love you, Silas Ward." He shuddered, pressing his forehead to hers. "I thought I'd never have to marry. I thought that part of me died too, but you—" He pulled back to meet her eyes. "I love you, Evelyn. God help me. I fought it, but—" "No buts," she said firmly. "No qualifications. Just love." That night, their lovemaking held a new tenderness, a reverence. He whispered endearments against her skin. How beautiful she was, how strong, how precious. She responded with equal fervor, mapping his body with lips and hands, claiming him as he claimed her. Afterward, tangled together in the aftermath, he suddenly chuckled. "What?" she asked, tracing patterns on his chest. "Just thinking how scandalized Boston society would be. Their properly raised Miss Whitmore, riding herd and taking improper liberties with a rough Wyoming rancher." She grinned. "Thoroughly ruined. That's me." "Thoroughly perfect," he corrected, pressing a kiss to her temple. The next morning brought the first real test of their newfound happiness. They rode to town for supplies. Evelyn in a new divided skirt that allowed her to ride astride. Another scandal for theoretical Boston sensibilities. In the general store, she was examining fabric when she heard a familiar voice that made her blood freeze. Well, Evelyn Whitmore. Or should I say, Mrs. Ward. She turned slowly. Charles Pemberton stood there, immaculate in his Eastern suit, smiling that predatory smile she remembered too well. "Mr. Pemberton." She was proud of how steady her voice sounded. "What brings you to Wyoming?" "Business ventures. The railroad opens up such opportunities." His eyes traveled over her, taking in her simple dress, her work-roughened hands. How you've adapted." Silas appeared at her elbow as if conjured. "Everything all right, sweetheart?" "Fine," she managed. "Silas, this is Mr. Pemberton from Boston. Mr. Pemberton, my husband." The two men sized each other up. Silas had inches and muscle on the Easterner, but Pemberton had the confidence of civilization and social position. "Pleasure," Pemberton said, though his tone suggested otherwise. "I knew your wife in Boston. We were quite close." Evelyn felt Silas tense. "That so?" "Oh, yes. Evelyn and I shared some memorable moments. Didn't we, my dear?" The implication in his voice was clear. Evelyn's hands clenched, remembering his hands on her, tearing at her dress, his weight pressing her down. "We're done here," Silas said curtly. He guided Evelyn toward the door, but Pemberton's voice followed them. "Hasty marriage, wasn't it? One wonders what drove dear Evelyn to such extreme measures." Silas stopped, turned. When he spoke, his voice was dangerously quiet. "One more word about my wife, and you'll be wondering how to eat with no teeth." Pemberton laughed. "Such rustic manners. I suppose Evelyn's told you why she really left Boston, the whole sordid story?" "She told me a snake forced himself on her and society blamed her for it," Silas said clearly, loud enough for the other customers to hear. "That about right?" Pemberton's face flushed. That's exactly what happened." "Mrs." Henderson interrupted from behind the counter. The older woman fixed Pemberton with a steely glare. "And we don't hold with men who can't keep their hands to themselves out here, Mr. Fancy Suit. Best you move along." Jake and Samuel materialized in the doorway, hands resting casual-like on their gun belts. The message was clear. Pemberton straightened his jacket. "I see. Well, good day, then." He tipped his hat mockingly at Evelyn. "We'll speak again, I'm sure." Outside, Evelyn was shaking. Silas pulled her into the alley beside the store, held her tight. "He can't hurt you here," he said fiercely. "I won't let him. What if he tells everyone? What if... Then they'll know what we know, that you're a survivor, that you're brave, that you're mine." He pulled back to look at her. "Let him talk. See how far it gets him." She searched his face. "You're not ashamed to have people know? Ashamed?" He cupped her face in his hands. "Evelyn Ward, I'm proud as hell to call you wife. That snake in there, he's nothing. Less than nothing. But you're everything." She kissed him there in the alley, not caring who might see. When they broke apart, some of her fear had eased. "Come on," he said. "Let's finish our business and go home." As they walked back to the store, she saw Pemberton heading hastily toward the hotel, shoulders hunched. Jake touched his hat brim as they passed. "Don't reckon that fellow will be staying long, boss," he said mildly. "Reckon not." Silas agreed. Inside, Mrs. Henderson bustled over. "You all right, dear? That man looked like trouble." "Old trouble," Evelyn said. "Nothing that matters now." The older woman patted her arm. "Good girl. Now, let's see about that fabric. I'm thinking something in blue would suit you mighty fine." As the women discussed cloth and patterns, Evelyn felt the last chains of her past falling away. Pemberton had no power here. The life she'd built with Silas, the respect she'd earned, the love they'd found. That was real. That was hers. That night, safe in their bed. She told Silas the full truth of that night in Boston, every degrading detail, every moment of fear and shame. He held her through it, his jaw tight with controlled rage. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. Then, "I should have hit him, despite everything." She laughed. "Your restraint was admirable. Won't be restrained if he comes near you again." He tilted her chin up. "You're under my protection now. Mine to cherish, mine to defend, mine to love. Understood." "Understood?" she whispered. He made love to her with aching tenderness, erasing Pemberton's phantom touch with reverent hands and lips. And when she woke in the deep of night, disturbed by bad dreams, he was there, solid, warm, real. "Just a dream," he murmured, pulling her close. "You're safe. You're home." Home. Yes, she thought, settling against him. This man, this ranch, this life, this was home. And she would defend it as fiercely as Silas would defend her. They were partners now, in every sense of the word. Spring surrounded them with new life and possibility. And Evelyn Ward, no longer the frightened girl who'd fled Boston, faced it with her head high and her heart full. The past might visit, but it could not stay. The future beckoned, bright with promise, and she would meet it hand in hand with the man who'd taught her that broken things could indeed be made whole again. 3 days after the encounter with Pemberton, Evelyn made her decision. The fear that had initially gripped her transformed into something else, a cold, clear determination. She couldn't keep looking over her shoulder, couldn't let Silas carry the burden of protecting her from shadows. She would face this herself. She found Silas in the barn, mending a bridle. "I'm going to town," she announced. He looked up, instantly wary. "I'll saddle up alone." She held up a hand when he started to protest. "I need to do this myself. Silas, I need to stop running." His jaw worked. "If he's still there, then I'll handle it." She crossed to him, took his face in her hands. "Trust me, like I trust you." He covered her hands with his, searching her face. Whatever he saw there made him nod slowly. "Take the rifle," he said gruffly. "And if you're not back by dark, I'll be back. She kissed him, tasting his worry. With my head high. The ride to Cedar Ridge had never felt longer. Evelyn's hands were steady on the reins, but her heart hammered against her ribs. At 17, she'd been sheltered, naive, unprepared for men like Pemberton. But the woman who rode into town that afternoon was different, shaped by loss and hard work, strengthened by love and trust. She found a room at the boarding house on the edge of town, Mrs. Garrett's place, respectable and clean. The older woman's eyes widened when Evelyn asked to rent a room for a few days. "Trouble at home, dear?" Mrs. Garrett asked carefully. "No, ma'am. Just some business to attend to." "Personal business?" Understanding dawned in the landlady's eyes. News traveled fast in small towns. "That Eastern fellow's been asking questions about you," she said quietly. "Unpleasant questions." "I know." Evelyn met her gaze steadily. "That's why I'm here." Mrs. Garrett nodded slowly. "Room's $2 a week, paid in advance, breakfast at 7, supper at 6. Evelyn had barely settled her few belongings when a knock came at the door. She opened it to find Samuel, hat in hand. "Boss sent me," he said simply. "I'm to stay in town. Keep an eye on things. From a distance," he said, "unless you need me." Despite her need for independence, Evelyn felt a wash of warmth. Silas was respecting her wishes while still ensuring she wasn't truly alone. "Tell him thank you, and Samuel. From a distance means from a distance." "Yes, ma'am." He touched his brim and disappeared down the stairs. It didn't take long for word to spread that Mrs. Ward was in town alone. By evening, Pemberton appeared in the boarding house parlor where Evelyn sat doing needlework, a deliberate choice of public space. "Evelyn." He settled into the chair across from her without invitation. "How civilized. I was beginning to think you'd lost all sense of propriety out here." She continued her stitching without looking up. "Mr. Pemberton, I wondered when you'd gather the courage to approach me directly." His laugh was sharp. "Courage, my dear girl. Mrs. Ward," she corrected calmly. "And I'm no girl. Not anymore." "No," he agreed, his voice dropping to that intimate tone she remembered with revulsion. "You've changed, grown harder. It's almost appealing." Now she did look up, meeting his gaze with steady eyes. "What do you want?" "Charles." The use of his first name made him lean forward. Predatory. "What I've always wanted. You. That interruption at your sister's party was unfortunate. But now I'm a married woman who wants nothing to do with you." "Married to a glorified cow farmer," he scoffed. "Come now. Evelyn, we both know you deserve better. I could set you up properly in Denver, San Francisco. Even you'd have everything. I have everything." She set aside her needlework, folded her hands in her lap. "A home, honest work, a husband who respects me. What could you possibly offer that compares?" His face flushed. "You forget, my dear, that I know the truth about you. One word from me about what really happened that night?" "You mean the night you assaulted me?" She said it clearly, loud enough for Mrs. Garrett to hear from the kitchen. "The night you cornered me in the garden, tore my dress, tried to force yourself on me despite my protests. That's not... I wanted you to stop." She stood, and he stood with her, moving too close. She didn't back away. "I told you to stop. I fought you. And when your wife found us, you let her believe I was the aggressor to save your own reputation. You little... But here's what you don't understand. Charles," she smiled, and something in it made him step back. "I'm not that frightened girl anymore. The worst already happened. I lost everything. My family, my reputation, my home, and I survived. I built a new life. So what exactly do you think you can threaten me with now?" "I could ruin you here too," he sputtered. "Tell everyone." "Tell them what? That you're a man who forces himself on unwilling women? That you're such a coward you followed me 3,000 miles because you can't accept rejection?" She laughed, and it felt like breaking chains. Go ahead. Tell your story. See who believes you. Mrs. Garrett appeared in the doorway, solid and formidable. Everything all right, Mrs. Ward? Fine, thank you, Mr. Pemberton was just leaving. I'm not done. Yes, Evelyn said firmly. You are. For 2 days. She maintained her vigil in town. She took meals in public, walked the streets with her head high, conducted her business openly. Pemberton tried twice more to corner her, once at the general store, once at the small restaurant. Both times. She faced him calmly, repeated her truth clearly, refused to be shamed or intimidated. The townspeople watched, whispered, judged. But something unexpected happened. Mrs. Henderson invited her for tea. The minister's wife stopped to chat about organizing a church social. Even gruff old Mr. Jameson at the feed store grumbled something about that eastern snake and slipped an extra pound of coffee into her order. On the third morning, she woke to find Pemberton gone. The hotel clerk, looking relieved, confirmed he'd taken the early stage east. Good riddance, the young man muttered. Made all the girls nervous, way he looked at them. Evelyn felt something release in her chest. Not just relief, but triumph. She'd faced her demon and won. Not through violence or masculine protection, but through her own courage and the truth. She rode home that afternoon to find Silas pacing the porch. He was off the steps before she'd fully stopped, pulling her from the saddle into a crushing embrace. 3 days, he muttered into her hair. Longest 3 days of my life. I'm fine, she assured him, but she clung just as tightly. He's gone, left on the morning stage. He pulled back to search her face. Did he? He tried to intimidate me, tried to shame me, but Silas... She smiled, feeling lighter than she had in years. I'm not ashamed anymore. What happened in Boston wasn't my fault. I know that now. Really know it. Not just in my head, but in my bones. His hands framed her face, thumbs stroking her cheekbones. My brave girl, he murmured. My warrior woman. That night, after they'd loved each other with desperate relief, she told him everything. How she'd faced Pemberton publicly, spoken her truth aloud, refused to hide, how the town had slowly sided with her, offering small gestures of support. Samuel said you never called for him, Silas noted, a mix of pride and frustration in his voice. I knew he was there if I needed him. That was enough. She traced patterns on his chest. Just like I knew you were here, trusting me to handle it. That gave me strength. Don't know if I could do it again, he admitted. Let you face danger alone. It wasn't danger. Not really. He's a coward at heart. All bullies are. She propped herself up on an elbow. But Silas, I'm done letting fear rule me, done letting the past chain me. I want to look forward now. Build our life. Maybe what? She took a breath. Maybe start a family. He went very still. She knew he was thinking of Thomas, of the child he'd lost. Evelyn, I know it's frightening. But isn't love always? Isn't that what makes it precious? That we choose it despite the risk? He was quiet for long moments. Then he rolled her beneath him, kissed her deeply. All right, he said roughly. All right. But if we're doing this, we're doing it together. Every step. Together, she agreed, and sealed it with another kiss. Later, as dawn approached, she lay wakeful and content. Through the window, she could see the first green shoots in the kitchen garden she'd planted. New life, new growth, new possibilities. The girl who'd fled Boston in shame was gone. In her place stood Evelyn Ward, rancher's wife, survivor, woman unashamed. She thought of Pemberton, probably halfway back to his safe eastern life by now. Once, he'd held power over her. Now he was nothing but a bad memory, defanged and dismissed. She'd written the ending to that chapter herself, with courage she hadn't known she possessed. Beside her, Silas stirred, reaching for her even in sleep. She curved into him, smiling, the future stretched before them. Uncertain, yes, but bright with promise. Whatever came, they would face it as they'd learned to face everything, together, honest, unafraid. The sun rose over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. A new day in Wyoming territory, a new page in their story. And Evelyn Ward, author of her own destiny at last, was ready to write it. The summer that followed was one of transformation. The ranch flourished under their combined efforts. Evelyn's gardens burst with vegetables and herbs. The cattle grew fat on good grass, and the house itself seemed to shake off its mourning shroud. She'd finally convinced Silas to let her freshen the main room with new curtains and a rag rug she'd made during the long winter evenings. The place felt like a home now, not just a shelter. Word of her confrontation with Pemberton had spread through the valley like wildfire, carried on the invisible telegraph of ranch wives and townspeople. But instead of the scandal she'd feared, Evelyn found herself welcomed into a community that valued courage over propriety. Ranch women who'd barely acknowledged her before now stopped to chat at church, sharing recipes and remedies, complaining good-naturedly about husbands and weather. "You've got spine, Mrs." Henderson declared one Sunday, pressing a jar of her prize-winning pickles into Evelyn's hands. "We respect that out here. That eastern peacock didn't know what he was tangling with." The acceptance warmed Evelyn more than she could express. For the first time in her life, she belonged somewhere not because of her family name or social position, but because of who she'd proven herself to be. She was feeding the chickens one morning when she heard horses approaching. Too many to be Silas returning from the north pasture. 3 riders appeared, and her heart sank as she recognized the lead figure. Not Pemberton, but another ghost from her past, her younger brother, William. He dismounted slowly, taking in her appearance, the simple calico dress, the apron, the bucket of feed in her work-roughened hands. "Evelyn? My God, is it really you?" "William." She set down the bucket, wiped her hands on her apron. "How did you find me?" "Pemberton," he said, removing his hat. "He returned to Boston full of tales about finding you out here. Father sent me to—" He trailed off, clearly struggling with his mission. "To what? Verify my shame? Drag me home?" She kept her voice level, but her hands clenched in her skirts. "To see if you were all right," he said quietly. "And to give you this." He pulled out an envelope, her mother's handwriting. Evelyn stared at it but didn't reach for it. "Father sent you?" "Mother did. Father doesn't know I'm here." William looked older than his 23 years, tired around the eyes. "May we speak privately?" She glanced at his companions, hired men by the look of them, watching the exchange with curious eyes. "Wait here." She found Silas in the barn and quickly explained. His face darkened. "Want me to send them packing?" "No, I need to hear what he has to say. But stay close." He kissed her forehead. "Always." She led William to the house, served coffee in her best china, a wedding gift from Mrs. Henderson. Her brother looked around the simple but clean room, taking in the evidence of her new life. "You look well," he said finally. "Different, stronger. I am stronger." She sat across from him, back straight. "What does Mother want? William?" He pushed the letter across the table. "Read it yourself." But first, he leaned forward. "Evelyn, what really happened that night? Father said you'd become wanton, that Pemberton had proof. But Mother never believed it. Neither did I." The faith in his voice nearly undid her. Of all her family, she'd been closest to William. "He attacked me," she said simply. "I fought him off, but his wife found us in a compromising position. The truth didn't matter after that." William's face flushed with anger. "That bastard. When he came calling with his stories, I wanted to call him out. But Father chose to believe the worst." She picked up the letter, turned it over in her hands. "As society demanded." "Not all of us," William said firmly. "Sarah cries for you still. And Mother, read the letter, Evie." Her childhood nickname made her throat tight. She broke the seal with unsteady fingers. "My dearest daughter," she read. "Not a day passes that I don't pray for your safety and happiness. William will have told you that Pemberton came with his poison, trying to destroy what peace we might have found in your absence. But I know, my girl. I know your heart. Whatever happened that night, I know you were not at fault. The letter went on. Her mother's grief at losing her father's stubborn pride, her sister Sarah's upcoming wedding. And then, at the end, there is money in the Boston Merchants Bank in your name, your grandmother's legacy, which came to me last month. Your father need not know. It's not much, but it's yours by right. Come home if you can. If you cannot, know that you are loved and missed every day. Your devoted mother. Evelyn set the letter down carefully, fighting tears. William reached across the table, covered her hand with his. Come home, Evie. Pemberton's influence is waning. There have been other incidents, other girls. People are starting to see him for what he is. And with grandmother's money, you could establish yourself independently. I am established. She turned her hand to squeeze his. William, I'm married, happily married. This is my home now. As if summoned, Silas appeared in the doorway. William stood, and the two men sized each other up. My husband, Silas Ward. Evelyn said, Silas, my brother William. They shook hands warily. William might be Boston bred, but he wasn't soft. Evelyn saw him note Silas's calloused grip, the quiet strength in his bearing, the protective way he positioned himself near her. Mr. Ward, William said formally. Mr. Whitmore, you're welcome in our home, though I'll thank you not to upset my wife. That's not my intention. William glanced between them, and Evelyn saw understanding dawn in his eyes. This wasn't a marriage of convenience or desperation. This was real. They talked through the afternoon, about the ranch, about Boston, about the strange turns life takes. William was fascinated by the working of the ranch, and Silas, warming to him, took him to see the horses. Evelyn watched from the porch as her brother, in his fine city clothes, learned to appreciate the beauty of a well-trained cow pony. At dinner, with the hands joining them, William saw her in her element, managing the meal, keeping conversation flowing, treating Jake and Samuel with the easy authority of a true ranch wife. When she laughed at one of Jake's stories, William smiled. You're happy, he said later, as they walked in the cooling evening air. Truly happy, I can see it. I am. She linked her arm through his. Happier than I ever was in Boston, even before. Everything. And he treats you well? This husband of yours? She thought of Silas's gentle hands, his fierce protectiveness, the way he looked at her like she'd hung the moon. Like a queen, she said softly. Like a partner, like an equal. William stopped walking. Then I'm glad. Mother will be glad too, when I tell her. You won't try to convince me to return. How could I? You're not the girl who left Boston. Evie, you're more bigger somehow. This place, this life, it's made you into who you were meant to be. She hugged him then, her proper Boston brother, and felt him return the embrace fiercely. I'll miss you, he said roughly. Sarah will be furious I found you and didn't bring you home. Give her my love. Tell her I'll write. Tell Mother too, but William, Father won't hear it from me. He promised. Your secret is safe. He left the next morning, but not before pressing a bank draft into her hands, access to her grandmother's legacy. In case you need it, he said, for the ranch, or whatever comes. She watched him ride away with mixed emotions, love for the brother who'd sought her out, sadness for the family she'd lost, but no regret. This was her place now, beside Silas, building something real and lasting. That night, she showed Silas the bank draft. His eyes widened at the sum, not a fortune, but enough to make improvements, buy better breeding stock, secure their future. It's yours, he said immediately. Your grandmother's gift to you. Ours, she corrected. Everything is ours now. He pulled her into his lap, buried his face in her hair. What did I do to deserve you? You saw me, she said simply. Not the scandal or the mail-order bride or the Eastern lady. Just me. Just you is everything, he murmured, and proceeded to show her exactly how much. Later, as they lay entwined, she told him about William's visit in detail, her mother's letter, the money, the invitation to return. Were you tempted? He asked carefully. To go back. She rose up on an elbow, looked down at him in the moonlight. Silas Ward, you listen to me. Boston was where I was born, but this, she placed her hand over his heart, this is where I choose to be, every day. I choose you. I choose us. I choose this life we're building. Understood. His answer was wordless but thorough, and when dawn came, they were still choosing each other, over and over again. The summer continued its golden progression. With the money from her grandmother, they bought a bull from a renowned breeder 2 valleys over, invested in better equipment, even talked about adding to the house. The ranch prospered. But more than that, they prospered. 2 people who'd found their way through loss and shame to something neither had dared hope for. Sometimes, working in her garden or watching Silas with the horses. Evelyn thought about the girl who'd stood in Boston's North Station, terrified and alone, reading a stranger's letter. That girl could never have imagined this. Dirt under her nails and joy in her heart. A husband who loved her fiercely and a community that judged her by her actions, not her past. Wyoming had given her more than a refuge. It had given her the chance to discover who she truly was when all pretense was stripped away. And that woman, strong, capable, ashamed, was someone she was proud to be. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire. Silas found her on the porch, pulled her back against his chest. "What are you thinking about so seriously?" he asked, pressing a kiss to her temple. "How far we've come," she said. "Both of us. And how far we've yet to go," he added, hands playing protectively over her still flat stomach. They hadn't told anyone yet about the new life growing within her, but the promise of it colored everything with hope. "Together," she said, lacing her fingers through his. "Always together," he agreed, and in the gathering darkness, with the vast Wyoming sky stretching endlessly above, it felt like a vow as sacred as any they'd made before witnesses. Here, in this hard and beautiful land, they'd built something worth keeping, something worth fighting for, something that no ghost from the past could ever take away. The attack came at dusk on a sweltering August evening. Evelyn was drawing water from the well when she heard horses. Too many, approaching too fast. Her hand went instinctively to her stomach, a protective gesture that had become habit over the past months as new life grew within her. "Silas?" she called, but he was in the far pasture with Jake and Samuel, moving the herd to fresh grass. 3 riders materialized from the heat shimmer, and her blood turned to ice. Pemberton, flanked by 2 rough-looking men whose hands rested too casually near their guns. "Hello, my dear." Pemberton dismounted with practiced ease, his clothes dusty but still finer than anything that belonged in Wyoming. "You've led me quite a chase. You need to leave." She backed toward the house, calculating the distance to Silas's rifle just inside the door. "Now." "Oh, I don't think so." He advanced slowly, savoring her retreat. "You cost me considerably. Evelyn, my reputation, my standing, even my wife has left me. Thanks to the doubts you planted, I think you owe me compensation." "I owe you nothing." She kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "What happened in Boston was your doing, not mine. Perhaps, but what happens here will be yours." His smile was cold. "You'll come with me, quietly, or things will become unpleasant for your husband. My associates here are quite skilled at making accidents happen. Cattle stampede, barn fires, a man alone on the range. You're threatening my husband." Rage flooded through her, temporarily eclipsing fear. "I'm offering you a choice. Come willingly. And he lives. Refuse." He shrugged eloquently. One of his men laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Pretty little thing. Can see why you chased her all this way. Mr. Pemberton." Evelyn's hand found the doorframe. Just a few more feet to the rifle. "You're making a mistake. This isn't Boston. Men who threaten women here." What, get run out of town? Pemberton's face flushed. I've already experienced your quaint frontier justice. This time, I came prepared. He nodded to his men. Take her. She lunged for the door, but they were faster. Rough hands seized her arms, dragging her back. She fought wildly, remembering another time, another struggle. But there were two of them now, and they were stronger. Careful with her, Pemberton said mildly. She's valuable intact. No! The word tore from her throat. Silas! Silas! A hand clamped over her mouth, cutting off her screams. They dragged her toward the horses, and she knew with crystal clarity that if they got her mounted, she'd never see home again. Then, thunder without clouds, gunfire. One of the men holding her cried out, spinning away with crimson blooming on his shoulder. The other released her, reaching for his weapon. But a second shot sent his gun spinning into the dust. Silas stood at the corner of the barn, rifle steady, his face carved from stone. Step away from my wife. Ward. Pemberton's hand twitched toward his jacket. This is between. Move toward that gun and you're dead. Silas's voice carried no emotion, just fact. Evelyn, come here. She ran to him, and he shifted slightly, putting himself between her and the men while keeping his rifle trained on Pemberton. You all right? He asked quietly, never taking his eyes off the threat. Yes. She was shaking now, adrenaline turning to tremors. Silas, he threatened you, said they'd hurt you if I didn't. I heard. His jaw tightened. Jake, Samuel, tie these men up. The ranch hands materialized from cover. Guns drawn. They'd been closer than she'd thought, responding to her scream. As they secured the wounded men, Pemberton tried one last gambit. You can't just. I'm a respected businessman. There are laws. There are. Sheriff Morrison's gravelly voice preceded him around the barn. And kidnappings against most of them. Evelyn sagged with relief. Behind the sheriff came half the men from town, armed and grim-faced, misses. Henderson must have sent word when Pemberton passed through. These men attacked my wife, Silas said, finally lowering his rifle. Tried to take her by force. That's a lie, Pemberton sputtered. She owes me. Only thing owed here is justice. The sheriff interrupted. And maybe a hanging, if the lady wants to press charges. No, Evelyn said quickly. When Silas looked at her in surprise, she straightened her spine. I want him to live with his failure, to know that he came all this way, spent all that money, threw away whatever reputation he had left, and still couldn't break me, still couldn't make me less than I am. She stepped forward, and Silas moved with her. A protective shadow. You want to destroy me because I wouldn't submit to you, because I fought back, because I survived and thrived despite you. Her voice grew stronger with each word. But look around. Charles, look at these men who came to defend me. Look at my husband who'd die before letting you touch me. Look at this life I've built. You have no power here. This isn't over, Pemberton hissed. You'll go to prison, Sheriff Morrison said matter-of-factly. Attempted kidnapping, assault, conspiracy. That's years in territorial prison. Unless you'd prefer we handle this the old-fashioned way. Several men shifted meaningfully, hands on gun butts. Pemberton paled, finally understanding the precariousness of his position. Prison, he said quickly. Prison. They took him away in irons. Him and his hired thugs. The townsmen lingered, accepting coffee and Evelyn's grateful thanks. But she could see Silas needed solitude, needed to process what had almost happened when they were finally alone. He pulled her into the barn, into the shadows where no one could see, and held her so tightly she could barely breathe. I almost lost you, he said raggedly. If I'd been farther away, if I hadn't heard you scream, but you did. She pulled back to frame his face with her hands. You saved me. Again, you saved yourself. His hands roamed over her, checking for injuries. Fighting them, buying time, refusing to break even when... He stopped, jaw working. When I saw them dragging you, I thought, God, Evelyn, I can't lose you, not you too. You won't. She guided his hand to her stomach, still flat, but holding their future. We're both safe, all three of us. He dropped to his knees, pressing his forehead against her middle. I should have killed him in town. Should have ended this before. No. She stroked his hair. Then you'd be the one in prison, and where would that leave us? You protected me the right way, the lawful way, the way that lets us move forward without looking back. He looked up at her, eyes wet. How are you so strong? Because you make me strong. Because this life makes me strong. Because, she smiled through her own tears, because I'm going to be a mother, and mothers have to be strong. He surged to his feet, kissed her deeply. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, he rested his forehead against hers. Inside, he managed. Now! They barely made it to their bed, hands desperate, needing the affirmation of touch. He loved her with fierce tenderness, whispering endearments and promises against her skin. She responded with equal passion, claiming him as he claimed her, washing away the memory of violent hands with gentle ones. Afterward, they lay intertwined, hearts gradually slowing. The room was dim with twilight, peaceful after the chaos. I was thinking, Silas said eventually, hands splayed protectively over her stomach. Maybe it's time to unlock that room. Clear it out. Make it ready. Evelyn turned to look at him. Are you sure? Thomas would want his toys played with again. Mary would want... His voice roughened. She'd want me to be happy, to move forward. She'd love you. I think, love that you brought me back to life. We brought each other back, Evelyn corrected softly. Maybe we could name him Thomas, if it's a boy. Thomas William, after your brother too. And if it's a girl, Mary Evelyn. He smiled, past and present together. She kissed him, tasting hope and healing. Perfect. The next morning, they opened the locked room together. It was harder than either expected, the small clothes folded neatly in drawers. The toys arranged just as a 4-year-old had left them. Mary's sewing basket with a half-finished shirt still waiting for her needle. They worked slowly, carefully. Some things went into a trunk for safekeeping. The daguerreotype from their bedside table joined by Thomas's favorite toy horse, Mary's wedding dress, a lock of the boy's hair, but other things they set aside for new life. The crib Silas had built with his own hands, the rocking chair where Mary had sung lullabies, the quilts made with love and hope. She pieced this while she was carrying Thomas, Silas said, fingering a sunny yellow quilt. Said every stitch was a prayer for his safe arrival. Then our baby should have it. Evelyn said firmly, those prayers don't expire. By afternoon, the room was ready, not erased of its past, but prepared for its future. They stood in the doorway together, his arm around her waist. Think we can do this? He asked quietly. Be parents when we know how much it can hurt? I think that's exactly why we can do it, she replied. Because we know how precious it is, how fleeting. We won't take a single moment for granted. A letter arrived the next week from the territorial marshal. Pemberton had been sentenced to 5 years hard labor. His associates got 3 each. Justice, frontier style, swift and sure. Evelyn felt nothing but relief. That chapter was closed now, sealed by law and community. She had more important things to focus on, the life growing within her, the ranch thriving around her, the man beside her who looked at her like she was his whole world. One evening, as summer gave way to autumn, she found Silas standing by the graves under the pine tree. She joined him silently, taking his hand. Telling them about the baby? She asked softly. Telling them thank you, he corrected, for the time I had with them, for teaching me to love, for, he squeezed her hand, for making room in my heart for you. They stood together as the sun set, painting the sky in shades of gold and crimson. The past was honored but not controlling. The future beckoned with promise, and the present, This moment, this love, this life they'd built from the ashes of their separate griefs, was everything. "I love you," Silas said, words that came easier now but never lost their weight. "Forever," Evelyn replied, and meant it with every fiber of her being. As they walked back to their home, she felt the baby quicken for the first time, a flutter like butterfly wings, like hope taking flight. She gasped, pressing Silas's hand to the spot. His face transformed with wonder. "Was that our future?" she said, laughing through sudden tears. "Saying hello." He dropped to his knees right there in the yard, pressing kisses to her stomach while she laughed and tried to pull him up, protesting that Jake and Samuel would see. "Let them," he said, grinning up at her with boyish joy. "Let the whole world see that Silas Ward is the luckiest man alive." And standing there in the gathering dusk, with new life dancing under her heart and her husband's arms around her, Evelyn knew that she was the lucky one. She'd traveled 3,000 miles expecting nothing but survival, and found everything: love, purpose, community, future. The girl who'd fled Boston in shame would always be part of her story, but she was not its ending. This moment of perfect happiness, earned through pain, secured by courage, and promised to last as long as the mountains that cradled their valley home. "Come on, lucky man," she said, tugging him toward the house. "Supper's getting cold." "Let it," he said, but followed anyway, unable to stop touching her hand, her waist, her cheek. In the kitchen, with lamplight painting everything golden, they moved together in the dance of domestic life. And Evelyn thought, not for the first time, that salvation came in unexpected packages, sometimes as a letter from a stranger, sometimes as a chance to begin again, but always as the courage to reach for love when life had taught you to expect only pain. Outside, the first stars appeared in the Wyoming sky, bright and constant as hope itself. And inside, two people who'd found their way through darkness prepared to welcome new light into the world, together. The September air held a crispness that spoke of coming change, and Evelyn moved carefully through the house, her body heavy with the weight of new life. 8 months along now. She'd adapted to the awkwardness with typical determination, though Silas watched her like a hawk, ready to catch her if she so much as swayed. "I'm pregnant, not porcelain," she reminded him for the 100th time as he rushed to take the water bucket from her hands. "Humor me," he said, pressing a kiss to her temple. "Doc Morrison said any day now." It was true. The old doctor had visited yesterday, pronouncing everything progressing well. The baby was positioned right. Evelyn was healthy despite her tiredness, and the small room, once locked against memory, now bright with fresh paint and hope, stood ready. That evening, they held a small gathering at the ranch. Not a formal party, just neighbors dropping by with gifts and good wishes. Mrs. Henderson brought tiny knitted booties. The minister's wife offered a christening gown that had served her own children, and even gruff Mr. Jameson presented a hand-carved rattle with awkward pride. "Never thought I'd see this place alive again," old Martha Brennan said, patting Evelyn's hand. "You've done more than give Silas a wife. Dear, you've given him back his life." As the sun set, painting the mountains in shades of rose and gold, their guests departed with promises to help when the baby arrived. Silas and Evelyn stood on the porch, his arms wrapped around her from behind, hands resting on her swollen belly. "Happy?" he asked, voice warm against her ear. "Beyond words," she replied, then gasped as a particularly strong kick made itself known, "though I think someone else is getting impatient." That night, she woke to a wet warmth and a cramping that stole her breath. "Silas," she whispered, then louder when he didn't stir. "Silas!" He was instantly alert, a skill learned from years of ranch life. "What is it? Is it—" "It's time." The next hours blurred together, Silas riding hard for Doc Morrison and Mrs. Henderson, the older woman taking charge with calm efficiency, the waves of pain that threatened to drown her until she remembered to breathe, to focus on what waited at the end. "You're doing fine, dear," Mrs. Henderson soothed. wiping sweat from Evelyn's brow. "First babies take their time, but this one's coming along nicely." Silas refused to be banished to the porch, as was customary. Instead, holding Evelyn's hand through each contraction, letting her grip hard enough to leave bruises. "I'm here," he whispered over and over. "I'm not going anywhere." Dawn was breaking, painting the room in soft light, when their child finally entered the world with a lusty cry that brought tears to every eye. "A daughter," Doc Morrison announced, cleaning the baby with practiced hands, healthy and perfect. Silas stared at the tiny bundle as if she might disappear. "A daughter," he repeated wonderingly. "Evelyn, we have a daughter." The baby was placed on Evelyn's chest, and the world narrowed to this moment, the warm weight of new life, the tiny fingers that gripped hers with surprising strength, the rosebud mouth already seeking sustenance. "Mary Evelyn Ward," she whispered, touching the downy dark hair. "Our miracle." Silas leaned over them both, one hand cupping his daughter's impossibly small head, the other stroking Evelyn's hair. "She's beautiful, like her mother. She has your eyes." Evelyn noted as the baby blinked up at them, gray-blue and already alert. "Poor thing," he said, but his voice was thick with emotion. After Mrs. Henderson and the doctor left, assuring them they'd check back later, the new family lay together in the big bed. Little Mary nursed with enthusiasm while her parents watched in amazement. "Were we really so bold as to think we could do this?" Silas asked softly. "Create life after knowing such death." "Not bold," Evelyn corrected. "Brave. There's a difference." Over the following days, they found their rhythm. Mary was an easy baby, crying only when hungry or wet, content to sleep in the cradle by their bed or in her father's arms as he walked her around the house, telling her stories about the ranch that would one day be part hers. The community embraced their joy. Food appeared daily on their doorstep. Ranch wives stopped by to offer advice and admiration, and Jake and Samuel competed over who could make the baby smile first. One evening, as Evelyn nursed Mary by the fire, she noticed Silas had grown quiet, staring into the flames with that distant look she'd learned to recognize. "What is it?" she asked gently. "I was remembering," he said slowly. "The night Thomas was born, how Mary laughed and cried at the same time when she first held him. How complete everything felt." He looked up at her. "I thought I'd never feel that again. Thought I didn't deserve to." "And now?" He moved to sit beside her, encompassing both wife and daughter in his embrace. "Now I know that love isn't finite. It doesn't run out. The love I have for Mary and Thomas, it's still there. Always will be. But it doesn't diminish what I feel for you and our Mary. If anything, it makes it deeper. They taught me how to love. You taught me how to love again." Evelyn blinked back tears. "She would have wanted this for you, for us." "I know." He pressed a kiss to little Mary's head, then to Evelyn's lips. "Sometimes I feel them, you know, like they're watching over us, glad we found our way." As if in response, baby Mary cooed, a sound of pure contentment that made them both smile. The weeks passed in a blur of feedings and diaper changes, first smiles and sleepless nights. But through it all, Evelyn felt a bone-deep satisfaction she'd never known before. This was what she'd been meant for, not the empty social rounds of Boston, but this life of purpose and love. One morning, she found Silas in the nursery, holding Mary up to the window, showing her the view. "See that?" he was saying softly. "All that land, far as you can see, that's your heritage, little one. These mountains will watch you grow, just like they watched your papa and your brother before you. This valley will know your footsteps, your laughter, your dreams." "Teaching her to love the land already?" Evelyn asked from the doorway. He turned, smiling. "Never too early. Besides, look at her, she's listening." And perhaps she was. Mary's gray eyes were fixed on the window, as if she could already see the future spreading before her, seasons turning, cattle grazing, the endless sky that promised freedom and possibility. "My brother sent another letter," Evelyn said, producing the envelope. "And a bank draft. He says it's for Mary's education, when the time comes." Silas shook his head in wonder. Boston money for a Wyoming child. Never thought I'd see the day. She'll have the best of both worlds, Evelyn said, joining them at the window. Eastern education if she wants it. Western strength to see her through. Choice, Silas. We're giving her choice. He shifted Mary to one arm, using the other to pull Evelyn close. Like the choice you made, to answer a stranger's letter, to come west, to take a chance on a broken-down rancher. The best choice I ever made, she said firmly. Though you weren't broken, just bent, we straightened each other out. Baby Mary gurgled, as if agreeing, and they laughed. That Sunday, they brought Mary to church for the first time. The entire congregation seemed to hold its breath as they entered. Evelyn carrying the baby in the christening gown the minister's wife had given them. The ceremony was simple but moving, as the minister sprinkled water on Mary's head, pronouncing blessings on her life. Evelyn caught Silas wiping his eyes. She reached for his hand, squeezing tight. I baptize thee, Mary Evelyn Ward. The minister intoned, in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit, may you grow in grace and wisdom, surrounded by love and community. Amen. The congregation responded as one, and Evelyn felt the word resonate in her bones. This was what she'd traveled 3,000 miles to find, not just a husband or a home, but a place where she belonged completely. At the celebration afterward, she stood with Silas on the church steps, greeting neighbors and accepting congratulations. Mary slept peacefully in her father's arms, unaware that she was the bridge between past and future, the living proof that joy could bloom from sorrow. Look at them, Evelyn heard Mrs. Henderson tell someone. From mail-order marriage to the strongest partnership in the valley, shows what love can do when you give it room to grow. That evening, as they sat on their own porch with Mary sleeping between them, Evelyn thought about the journey that had brought them here. The frightened girl reading a stranger's advertisement in Boston seemed like someone from another lifetime. The frozen man she'd married that cold November day bore little resemblance to the devoted husband and father beside her now. What are you thinking about? Silas asked, noting her contemplative mood. Beginnings and endings, she said. How what seems like an ending, leaving Boston, your losses, can really be a beginning in disguise. And this? He gestured to the three of them. The ranch spreading beyond, the life they'd built. What's this? Evelyn smiled, lifting Mary to nurse as she began to fuss. This is the middle of our story. The good part. The part where we live happily. Ever after? He teased gently. Ever after is for fairy tales. She said, we're better than that. We're real. We've earned our happiness through pain and struggle and choice. That makes it stronger than any storybook ending. Silas kissed her temple, then Mary's tiny fist. You're right, though I'd still take the ever after, if it's on offer. Oh, it is, Evelyn assured him, watching their daughter nurse with perfect trust. Every day we choose each other. Choose this life. Choose love over fear. That's our ever after, one day at a time, one season at a time, for all the years given to us. The sun set behind the mountains, painting the sky in shades of fire and gold. Somewhere in the distance, cattle lowed. The evening breeze carried the scent of sage and possibility. And on the porch of a ranch house in Wyoming territory, three hearts beat in harmony, past healed, present cherished, future bright with promise. You'll never be just a wife, Silas murmured, echoing words from long ago. You're my salvation, my partner, my love. The mother of my children, all of them. The keeper of my heart. Evelyn leaned into him, their daughter safe between them. And you're my choice, she replied. Every day, in every way, forever my choice. The first stars appeared in the darkening sky, and little Mary opened her eyes, gazing up with infant wonder. Her parents held her close, held each other closer, and knew that sometimes the greatest adventures begin with the courage to answer an unexpected letter, to board a westbound train, to trust that somewhere in this vast, wild country, love is waiting to transform two broken hearts into one whole and beating life. In the morning, There would be chores and challenges, diapers and duties, but tonight there was only this: a family forged from loss and hope, a love that had crossed continents to find itself, and the absolute certainty that some chances, once taken, lead to exactly where we're meant to be. The end. Thank you so much for joining us around the Wild West Campfire to hear Evelyn and Silas's story. We'd love to know where you're listening from, whether you're driving through the mountains, cozied up at home, or maybe even somewhere out in the wide open country. Drop a comment and let us know your location so we can connect with listeners from all over. Don't forget to subscribe to Wild West Campfire for more tales of love, adventure, and redemption in the American frontier. What did you think of Evelyn's journey? Would you have had the courage to answer that advertisement and head west? Share your thoughts below. We read every comment and love hearing from our campfire family.